perfect place. Hey everyone, I am so excited about today's conversation and really, really excited to share Francesca and her work with you. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so stoked. It's going to be a great conversation.
We were having this little chat as we were getting started of like, it was really only a matter of time before our worlds collided. And so much of your work parallels with what we do. And you have like the science to back it and the tangible tools to back this idea of really being able to reframe some of these beliefs we carry with us into our big ideas. So this is going to be a juicy one.
It's going to be a good one for sure.
Oh my goodness. Well, in case anyone isn't familiar with you and your story, your background, I'll let you really jump in where you feel it would be most relevant to this conversation. But, you didn't wake up as the version of you that you are now.
Mhm.
I'd love if you would take us back to maybe a time in your life where you didn't have access to these tools and then share how it inspired the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it'll be really relatable for a lot of people. Most of my career was really in New York City, working in advertising and marketing. And those were sort of my conscious goals. I knew that that was the industry or field I wanted to be in. And I had kind of set a plan for myself at the agency I wanted to work at and what accounts I wanted to work at. But what I sort of discovered on that journey is once I checked those off and I hit those marks, it wasn't this like internal celebration or like I was really proud of myself. It was just like, okay, I'm on to the next thing. What's the next kind of milestone or achievement that needs to hit? And I think when you do that for a certain period of time and you don't feel that sort of internal joy or peace, something feels disconnected, something feels like it's missing. And that was kind of the moment for me that when I had jumped about a couple different industries, going client side, going startup side, that I was like, something is off. And I think I need to get to know myself a little bit better to find out what really drives me and what makes me happy. So I ended up going to Bali and discovering breath work, which was this unbelievably transformative practice that just breaks you open and takes you deep into your subconscious mind and those internal drivers and those deeper motivations, and just started to really explore myself. And paired that with a couple other modalities that we can definitely talk about. But it was really just this journey of discovering dissatisfaction, sort of seeking and being curious and opening a bit spiritually that kind of led me on this path where I'm very much living my purpose and very happy now.
Okay, there was something that you said, a specific word you said that I want you to expand on and talk about the difference. You said your conscious goal.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit because this is going to parlay into what we share later.
So I don't know how many of your listeners are like Dr. Joe Dispenza fans, neuroscientist, who really bridges the gap for us between spirituality and science and talks a lot about epigenetics and quantum physics. But he basically says that we spend 95% of our time in our subconscious mind. So below the surface, unconscious motivations, habits, behaviors, identities, and only 5% in our conscious mind, our ego, what it is that we think we want and know. So my conscious mind and my conscious goals were very much driven around status and significance and success, where my subconscious, I have chills, was seeking something much deeper than that. And it's really hard to access your subconscious mind, even just intellectually speaking, you and I right now, we're very much in maybe beta alpha state brain waves, where to get into your subconscious, you have to slow down and you have to be able to access those deeper states so that we can get into those internal drivers.
Yes. Okay. I'm like, this already is going to be so good because what I can so relate to about that is that feeling of chasing after something only to realize when I achieved it, it just didn't feel how I thought it would feel. And until you know better, you think then another goal is the answer. So can you speak to those women who are listening, either whether they're at the beginning of their business journey or they're just kind of leaning into that feeling, there's something off, there's more for them. How do we start to tap in to the actual driver, the thing we want versus like the conscious thing we think we want, which is like the external goal itself?
Yeah. So I'll give you a really easy read that I think everybody would just enjoy. Like this is just such a beautiful, simple book to read, in the evenings. It's called Living the Light by Shakti Gawan, and it's a recommendation of Eckhart Tolle's. And she basically starts to introduce this concept of listening to your body. So when you think you want something, take a second and get really still with that and see if this is a conditioned goal. Is this something that would make your parents proud? Is this something that looks good on an Instagram bio? Or is this something that's actually lighting you up inside? And if you can just take a pause before you react, before you are impulsive about that sort of first urge, and just get still and really honest with yourself and just feel into your body, tune into your body. It'll tell you. It'll show you. There's so many people right now that are in that role that they think they're supposed to be in. They don't want to get out of bed in the morning. They don't want to show up on those Zooms. They don't want to go into the office. It's not internally lighting you up. That is your first sign. That is your sign to go deeper and to start exploring just tuning into your body and what it's telling you.
Which is so brilliant, because if I think about phases of my life where there were clear signs that I wasn't even taught how to listen to, instead, I did the opposite. I did more work, more things that disconnected me from feeling. And so, can you speak a little bit to how do we, if we've never been taught how to even start to tune in to our physical body, which holds so much wisdom?
Yeah.
Maybe I would even love to hear like your journey with discovering that, and then what we can take away, because I'm sure I can imagine this New York version of you probably being similar to a previous version of me. And just like, I did all the external things
Yeah.
instead of tuning into the wisdom that my body itself really holds.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are finding themselves right now chasing the hamster wheel, and it's just this never ending, insatiable void that the more you do, the more you achieve. It just doesn't fill it. So obviously, we'll get into hypnobreath work because that's really the accelerator, the catalyst into intuition, in my opinion. But my intuition really developed over time. It was just little pings that I would start to listen to. And it really did start with that book. I would try to tune in and be like, does this light me up? Does this not light me up? And if it was like, oh, my body does not, that's rejecting that, it was just a hard no. And then when my body would say, oh, that feels exciting, or I'm curious about that. I literally did this for an entire year after that first trip to Bali, where I was like, okay, start to apply to marketing jobs again. And my body was like, nope, don't want to go there. Book a flight to India. Oh, that feels fun. So I did this little dance, not knowing exactly that I was building up my intuition at the time, but the universe would start to reward me in really interesting ways when I followed this sort of gut instinct. So I'd book the flight, to Thailand, and then I'd get $1,000 flight voucher, and I'd be like, that feels like a little reward. That feels like a little layup, from the universe. Or I would book a retreat, and then I would meet some fascinating people that would take me onto the next level of my journey. So all these little synchronicities started happening when I listened to that inner voice and that gut feeling versus my ego or what I thought, my conditioning thought I should be doing. And the more little rewards and clues on the path I got, the louder the intuition became. Then it was really clear. Nope, you're not going back into marketing. That is done, and then it would be like, oh, I just got a DM from this person who wants to try breathwork. Maybe I'm going to start my coaching practice. Oh, there's the apartment for my meditation. You have the courage to act on those little whispers in the beginning.
Yeah. I want to ask this question. This is something I've been asked before as someone who's like really been in this journey of starting to understand my own intuition. Is this: how do you know when it's your intuition saying like a firm no, that's not for you, versus the discomfort that comes along with being called to something that it's going to stretch you, it's going to make you grow. So it does maybe in that moment feel uncomfortable. And I've had a hard time actually putting words to the difference.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you would explain that.
Yeah, I think this is a really common question. Is that my fear or is that my intuition, right? So, we've crafted sort of a very methodological journey in our hypnobreathwork sessions that ask you to clear the block first and clear any emotion towards whatever it is that you're thinking about, your intention, whatever it is that you're manifesting, so that the emotion's out of the way and your channels are clear. At that point, once we get, 2/3 of the way into the journey, then we ask you, now what's your intuition saying about this? What is your next step with this? And usually people get a very clear image or insight or message that gives them that clear direction and guidance that they're looking for. So the interesting thing about connecting breathwork to intuition is that there is science behind the fact that it's oxygenating your body. It is stimulating different regions of your brain. It's getting you out of the conditioned thoughts, the analytical mind, more into your body, more into your soul, activating altered states so that you can hear that deeper knowing, that inner knowing that we all have, but has been really clouded by a lot of world biases and perceptions and other people's opinions.
Okay. So I feel like we keep kind of like dancing around the topic of breath work. So I want to have you
Yeah.
unpack what that is, but I first would love to hear the story. How were you introduced to it? What was your first
Oh
breath
my
work
gosh.
experience?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So Insatiable Me goes to Bali and signs up intuitively for this 7-day holotropic breathwork retreat, assuming it's a meditation or a yoga, kind of blissed out experience. Next thing I know, I am convulsing, crying, shaking, just releasing decades of baggage, from my body, and like, whoa, what was that experience? So breath work is an umbrella term. It is becoming quite popular. There are many different styles, calming, energizing. What we do is really breaking psychological patterns. So my first experience with breath work, I was really trying to kind of go a little bit deeper, understand some of my habits and why I was choosing New York or San Francisco or what industry I wanted to be in. And it just showed me this image of myself as a little girl, like 7 years old, and a message that was really clear that said, you're too hard on yourself. You're too hard on yourself. You're too hard on yourself. And I just cracked. I mean, I was bawling. It was a perspective that I've never really given myself. Like self-compassion, I think, is really hard for a lot of people. So to see yourself in that state and give yourself grace is incredibly healing. So that cracked me. And then it was a 7-day, really intense journey. And I ended up, seeing my relationship with my mother on a deep experiential level. I ended up seeing my ex and forgiving him for things I didn't know I was still holding on to. A lot of mean girl behavior in college I had to let go of and make amends. And so my first introduction to breathwork was really intense. It was deeply healing and transformative. And it was such a profound impact on my life that I ended up studying it around the world, really taking kind of what I felt was the most effective and efficient parts from different instructors and styles, and then adding other modalities to that, and eventually creating my own methodology, which is hypnobreathwork that combines hypnosis to it as well, so that we can actually reprogram those limiting beliefs within the session, which is hyper efficiency.
Ooh, I'm like, this is this is like my jam right here. The moment you said Dr. Joe Dispenza, I knew we were just like on that level. But what's been interesting, so I feel like what going down this road for myself has taught me, number one, the power of really tuning into my body. But I've realized I need other tools to assist me to do that. Because when I sit down and just try to meditate, it's even if I can really beautifully tap into a different brain state, it's still, there's stuff that's like stuck. So will you talk about like the physiology of why, maybe even it's your specific methodology, right? The hypno breath work specifically, how does that actually work with the way our body stores these memories and emotions?
Yeah, so we are not meditation. And I think that's a big confusing kind of point for a lot of people. Breathwork is not meditation. Meditation is a very passive state. You are, observing thoughts and behaviors. You are calming your mind. You are maybe regulating your nervous system. breath work is a lot more intense. It's a lot more active. It's a lot more physical. So what's actually happening in your body is you are changing the balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide. We do this 2-part inhale, 1-part exhale. It's circular, it's connected, it gets energy moving, it gets emotion moving. And what it also does is it starts to quiet down the prefrontal cortex of your brain. Again, that's the analytical mind. That's thinking in the same way you've always thought. And it allows you to activate different regions, different areas, so that you can pull in new insights. You can make new creative connections. You can think more expansively, which is what I think is really powerful for a lot of your audience, because there are a lot of limiting beliefs as it pertains to women and to our culture and what we've been shown in society. So to get into this state and to really expand on a subconscious and experiential level, it's a game changer. It's completely game changing. And our method uses such intentional vocal cues and music to get you into a specific state. And we reprogram whatever that block is. We reprogram that limiting belief, and we always connect you to a higher vision. But my favorite part of our sessions is last song never fails. Every single time we say, now, what is your next action step from that state? So it's no longer just an experience, but it's a tangible way to change your behavior in real time.
I'm like actually having trouble just staying in my chair, because here's why. And I'm going to have you answer this question next. There was a time as I was like this little baby getting into personal development, learning about affirmations and learning about writing out my goals. And I always felt so frustrated by the ineffectiveness of just stating these positive beliefs about myself. But then the next 23.75 hours of the day, not realizing that I'm in a loop of the old conversation, that it's one thing to state these intentions or how we want to feel about ourselves, but not realizing where those are actually stored. So can you talk to affirmations, maybe the myth of affirmations, whatever your perspective is, and how this strategy is really different?
Affirmations are nice, vision boards are nice, talk therapy is nice. Like there's a lot of nice modalities. But I think in order for something to really stick, it has to penetrate the subconscious mind, or else it's just going to bounce right back out. And that's why people are constantly finding themselves fighting against the current. So there's this really effective diagram that I'll just try to kind of visually explain. If you can imagine your brain kind of developing all of these positive and negative beliefs from the ages of 0 to 7 through your primary caretakers, your parents, okay? And then once you start to get older and your brain develops, you start to build what's considered a critical factor, where you'll start to kind of analyze whether or not that's true or it's in alignment with what was instilled in you by your mom and your dad. So if your parents told you that you have to eat all the food on your plate, or children in Africa are starving, then that's what's ingrained in your subconscious mind, which is where we spend 95% of our time. So if you say, I want to diet, I want to lose weight, but your subconscious belief is, I have to eat all the food on my plate, that is going to bounce right back out. You are going to feel like you are swimming against the current. Same thing for parents showed you, relationships don't last, all men cheat, whatever those beliefs are, then you say, I want to be in a healthy relationship. It's going to bounce right back out. So that's why positive affirmations, when you say, I am confident, I am secure, I am powerful, if you don't believe that on a subconscious level, it is going to bounce back out. That's why we use the breath to penetrate the subconscious. Now we have the opening into the deeper parts of your mind. And then we introduce the new visions, we introduce the new hypnotic suggestions, but most importantly, we have you feel the emotion of that state ahead of the event, which is Dr. Joe 101, right? So now, what does the most powerful version of yourself look like when you're beyond the walls and the barriers and the defenses and the trauma and the pain and the wounds? What does it look like now? And what does it feel like? Does it feel like gratitude? Does it feel like love? Does it feel like creativity? Does it feel like abundance? Now we're generating the emotion. We're firing new neural pathways. And the more you do it consistently and you reinforce it, that's how you change your energy. That's how you change your life.
Okay. So I imagine the next question that's coming up for some people, if this is brand new, is, okay, is that saying that I do it once and then I'm free? Is it, that's like the natural question is like, then how long do I need to practice that? Which I'm sure you get asked that a lot.
I wish you could do it one time and all your problems are solved. There are definitely 100%, there are breathwork sessions that you can do and your life will be changed, or that circumstance in your life will be changed. It took one for me to really heal my relationship to my mother, which is insane. I've had clients who have healed estranged relationships to their parents of 20 years in one session. Incredible. But when you are looking to change a pattern that has been wired in your nervous system for decades, this work is going to take consistency. That's why we developed an app for this, to make it very accessible. Every single morning, I do a session so that I am operating from my highest self. I know that the conditioning and the triggers can hit at any time. So if I can start the day at that kind of peak state and go as long as I can, which usually lasts till around 3 p.m.-ish, and maybe then I need like a second little booster, that's a pretty strong morning, And the more you practice that state, the more and more it becomes innate. So I say consistent 20-minute practice in the morning.
Yeah, I almost hear it like, I actually don't drink coffee, but like people operate that way with their coffee, just maybe replace this, right? So morning, and then it might last you till afternoon, but that's such a beautiful reminder that, it is, the key word here is a practice. It's a practice that you're training, you're literally rewiring your brain to think differently, to believe differently.
And you will be shocked too, it's like, one of the things that I work on, and I would assume you're in a very similar way, like a lot of the business things are maybe innate, like a lot of the entrepreneurial, the resilience and the fortitude and the leadership, maybe some of those skills are innate. The ones that I have to practice more are maybe vulnerability, or maybe more compassion or empathy. And it shocks me sometimes because those are the things I'll reprogram in my subconscious. And then my partner will say something triggering. And then I'm open and calm and I'm loving and I communicate and I'm like, oh my gosh, that really shifted. It's really working, And it's like, I've only been working on that one for a few months. Like, that's awesome. So the shifts will happen at a much accelerated pace, especially when you mentally rehearse one specific scenario. So in some sessions, people are like, I just want to crush this presentation or this meeting, or I have a tough conversation coming up, and they'll do one hypno breathwork session, just solely focusing on that, seeing how they want to show up, hearing the words that they need to say, mentally rehearsing it in their breath, come out, execute. And it's brilliant. And that's one meeting down, where you showed up in your highest alignment, and who knows the ripples that comes from that. So one session is powerful. Doing it daily will change. You will literally create the life that you want if you do it daily.
So it's interesting you share that, because in some of the other work I've been doing, something that it was quite shocking to discover, right? Because a lot of these subconscious beliefs or programs are so hidden from our view, or we don't even realize we're living in that emotion because it just feels like us. And one that I imagine is pretty common, if I look at the women in my world, is realizing. So I had this realization that I live my life through a lens of guilt. There's just guilt really laid over almost everything that I do, almost every conversation that I have. And it was so shocking to become aware of it that it was almost overwhelming, because I started to see it everywhere. But as I've started to practice different modalities of looking at the relationship, and now now that I'm aware of mastery and the app and everything that we're going to have you talk about, layering this on top, what I can share is I've had these moments where I actually experienced a period of time without the guilt. And it was almost, and so I want you to speak to this, it was almost shocking in that it was so different than anything I'd ever experienced. It almost made me want to cling to the thing that I really want to be free from.
Yeah.
So can you talk about those really ingrained fears or emotions or subconscious beliefs that I think for some of us, there will be this beautiful process of overcoming and continuing to practice and overcoming. But it was surprising to me that I noticed my mind. I kind of was able to step back and watch my mind crave the familiarity of the emotion I actually wanted to be free from, if that makes sense.
Oh my gosh, it makes so much sense. So I'd actually love to go in that for a second, because with guilt, it's often that we're living in the expectation of others.
Yep.
And your practice then is to honor yourself. and it's to honor what you truly want, and to even reprogram the sort of consequences or effects of that. Like what I find with a lot of my clients or students who are like habitual people pleasers, you know, they're saying yes when they want to say no, and then that resentment stacks, and then they start to feel disconnected. And when they begin to practice the art of saying no, which no is a complete sentence, we now know this, it's really uncomfortable. But the story has been built up so much, you know, and that creates this emotion of fear around it. But oftentimes when they're like, no, the other person's like, okay. And then they're like, oh my gosh, it's so liberating now, you know, it's so free. So I think it's actually more simple than you think it is. We all have our blocks, we all have our wounds, we all have our conditioned sort of crutch or behavior or that emotion that we default to. And because it's what we're used to, and that's what's familiar, that's what we want to default to. And, you know, we see this in relationships a lot of the times. I'll give you an example. I used to go to therapy and tell, you know, my therapist about a really toxic relationship I was in. And I was like, I know it's bad for me. I know I'm not in my worth. I know it's unhealthy. And she would say, you deserve better than this. This is coming from your relationship to your father. And I'm like, I totally understand. And then I would leave, and then I would go to his house, right? It's like, we know, but our nervous system craves the familiar. Mm-hmm. When you breathe on it, the interesting thing about the breath is it takes you to the root of the emotional charge. So for you, I would assume there was a moment where maybe mom made you feel guilty for not choosing her, or there was something that happened. There's a root to that experience. And when you can get to the source of where the behavior was formed, it will actually dissipate from your body. You have no idea how freeing that will be for you and the rest of your decisions and the rest of your relationships when you can get to the source and forgive yourself and heal yourself and give yourself that grace of where it started. It literally like you will feel it. You will feel the energy dissipating from your body, from that charge. And then when you practice saying no, you know, the first time it's still a little bit uncomfortable because it's not familiar, but then the next time it's only 30%. And then the next time it's only intense at 20%, until it's your default now to say no when it doesn't honor you and not feel guilty about it. So Eckhart Tolle always says that, you know, when you bring awareness to a trigger, it'll dissipate half, and then half the next time, and half. And I honestly think that breath work accelerates that process. But find the source, and I'm happy to guide you through a session anytime. Get to the source of the guilt, dissipate it, release it, see how you want to show up in the world, and practice that.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, this could easily turn into a selfish coaching session, but I bring that up because I know that it's not unique to me. I think whether it's, and there were seasons where it manifested more as people pleasing. I think my specific flavor of it is tied to being really afraid to, shine too bright. It's like afraid that it's going to make other people feel a certain way. And it's the one that just continuously comes back up in different seasons. So it's clear that it's still got a hook in me somewhere.
But I'm telling you, if I could guide you right now because it's pretty clear on the surface. And if I said, find the root, it would be high school, your best friend got jealous. There's a moment. Yeah. There's a moment where it started. And when you get it, it starts to break.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm taking you up on that. We'll talk a little bit about that offline, because it's something that, and it's actively right now manifesting itself, because I think this is just a really big season for us in the business. And it tends to revisit right as there's about to become like an evolution, if you will.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think even with your event coming up, like I'll just plant some seeds so that they're ruminating for you. But it's like, the more you shine and the more bright you are, like you're really inspiring a group of other women to be able to show up that way, you know? And so sort of these worries or these doubts, even as you're being so aware of that process right now, I think that in itself is inspiring for people. And for you to be able to get to the other side. I mean, I just heard Oprah say something like she was always afraid that people are like, oh, she's full of herself. And I was like, Oprah felt like that. Right. That's so nice.
So seen.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And for
Yeah.
us who are inspired by her, it's like, it is our opportunity to see the root of our block, have the courage to overcome it, and then show up and shine as bright as we are and as we feel. And then that then paves the way for a lot of other people to do the same.
I'm so grateful for you sharing that. And, and I hope those of you listening really hear that this is an ongoing journey. There's always something new
Yes.
I get to discover. And I'm sure in your personal practice too, the same for you. What would you say are some of those most common fears, blocks that you see among, and I know you and I work with similar types of women and people. What would you say are some of the most common? Because maybe this will awaken something in a person who's listening that was like, wait a minute, when you said that, something in me
Yeah.
moved, and that might be an indication.
So when I first started coaching, I actually was holding community sessions online during COVID, and I would ask people about, what they were going through, what they were experiencing in a session, how they felt afterwards, and I tracked all of it. I would take all of those chat notes and put it into Excel documents and just track behavior patterns. So I actually know from a more data-centric place that the most common intention for women was releasing self-doubt. They were plagued by self-doubt. And interestingly enough, for the men, it was needing security, like needing to know. Yeah. So
Wow.
really interesting, and of course there was always nuances, and especially during the pandemic, it was really interesting to watch things shift in different months, from relationship conflicts to financial scarcity. But I think everyone has fears. Everyone has self-doubt, and every single person suffers from I'm not enough. So those are universal. Those are common. Some people show it more than others, but it exists in everybody, and it's layered, and it can be very convoluted, but it's really an opportunity for us to see our humanness, to connect with each other, because we all have those different emotions and those feelings, and finding the tools for us that can shift us out of that state and connect to something greater.
Oh my goodness. I'm so grateful to you for following this call. I'm grateful to you for making it so available on a massive scale. And we're going to talk about the app next. But I just really want to take a moment to honor you and your
Oh,
journey and what it took to get here, because the implications of this are really beyond what we can even measure in terms of the freedom that it's going to give people and is already giving people.
thank you so much. Like, that's so kind for you to acknowledge. It was interesting. It did feel like a call. As I was going through this journey, I was like, I have to document this. Like, I have to share how intense this is and how deep this is, and that I've been crying all night, and that I feel really blissed out today, and just kind of the different stages of this. And what I realized is, after a year of doing intense self-development work, I mean, I'm talking ayahuasca and combo and bufo and a 10-day silent vipassana and reading 70 psychospiritual books, doing all the things, I was like, okay, I think I'm in a really good place. I think I'm healed. And then you get into a relationship and you're like, ah, shit. There's a whole other slew of daddy issues. And then you launch your own company, and then you're like, good God, now I'm dealing with all these other. So it is so layered. It is an ongoing journey. But what I have discovered is, through this work, and again, I really try to create the most efficient modality that everybody could tap into to shift, because I know it keeps going. Like, it doesn't matter how many years you've been meditating, it doesn't matter. Like, there's one situation that can trigger you. Your dad can say one thing and you just turn into that little girl again. So it was really important to me to, really observe and document my journey, and to also really document all the behavior patterns I was seeing in clients and students, and create something that everybody needed and could, on demand, find that topic, find that session, and in 20 minutes, get out of that state.
And so when did that click for you that an app was going to be the best delivery system for that?
So this is kind of a cool story. It was like the second to last day of my Bali retreat, actually. Like, on that very first retreat, the whole app came together. And it was wild. It was like I saw UX and wireframes and the user journey and acquisition and monetization. Like I had birthed an entire company in my mind, and it was the most
Wow.
exhilarating creativity I'd ever experienced. And I actually came out of that and I put together a pitch deck in 24 hours because I was so crystal clear. And I started pitching investors and I started looking for developers. But the universe took me on a really interesting journey. And this is one thing I've learned that I think everybody, especially in your audience, can benefit from, is knowing when you're in force or flow. So the creative inspiration came through me. And because I'm an executor, I went and immediately started trying to take action on that. But then what ended up sort of happening was this idea was ruminating and it was developing, and I was constantly aware of it. But the universe wanted me to kind of start coaching and learn more about psychological patterns and see how I could craft a hyper efficient, modality and start to build my network and build my audience and build my brand. So I trusted that. And while it was always there, I was sort of following the cues of the journey I needed to be on now. And then when the moment was right, I, got a synchronistic text that was like, let's build this thing, let's do it. And it started to come into fruition. And now we're 5 months live,
Oh my
which is so
goodness.
awesome. Yeah.
And it is so cool. So we just connected recently and booked this interview before you head to Bali again. So I just had a chance to download the app yesterday and start to dive in and start to like fully understand. And first of all, the design is beautiful. It's like so aesthetically pleasing, which is important.
Yeah.
And the resources available are insane. I mean, everything we've been talking about, if you're like, okay, great, like tell me how I dive into this, the app, and we're going to link all of the information, but it's called Mastery, Mastry is how you spell it. It is so well done.
Well, it's all done through hypnobreath work. So here's the cool thing. We do this practice to initially clear the blocks, and the blocks will come up, along the journey. But once you heal sort of the inner child and some of those suppressed emotions or things that are leaking in your energy, you get really clear. And what we discovered is through the right music, through the right cues, through the right intention, we can actually activate flow state, that optimal consciousness where things are flowing, where creativity is really connecting, where people can see the next level of their business. They know what their next tangible action step is. And every single step of mastery has been built through hypnobreath work. The design, who we're working with, the agency, every single thing is built intuitively. So it's been really magical to take the business side of things and understand branding and marketing and development and strategy, and then infuse it with this kind of inner knowing and this inner guidance of this is the next thing to prioritize. This is how the layout should look. This is who you reach out to next. And now we're, like I said, 4.5, 5 months in, and we're already in conversations with Nike, Deloitte, Snapchat, huge brands to bring this work into corporate, which will make such a massive impact. And it's all because myself and everyone that's working on the business is using hypnobreathwork and is in flow state.
I mean, there's no better testament than that.
Yeah,
really.
Right. Exactly.
It's so good. So I want to, as we start to like bring this to a close, you touched on something that I want to tease out just a little bit more. And I think this is the perfect way to wrap up everything that you've shared is you mentioned the force versus flow, but then there's this intuition side versus strategy. And I would love for you to speak to what you've realized for yourself is kind of that way to stay in the sweet spot, because it does require strategy, requires the masculine energy of us to do and achieve, while also understanding that there is a point where we get to, and we might find ourselves forcing or controlling. I would love to hear your philosophy on that, because I believe that this is so important for women, especially to understand.
So for everyone who's listening to this, they are likely to be more achievement mindset, success driven, right? In my opinion, we can't live in love and light all the time, and as it pertains to business. While I'm very spiritual, like I said, I'm an executor. So my motto, my mantra in life that you will hear me say a million times is intuitive action. Intuitive action. It is that symbol. That is leading with your feminine and following with your masculine. So yes, be in flow, but then you have to act on it. And that's going to take courage sometimes. And that's going to be uncomfortable sometimes. And that's going to require you to breathe through feeling like a burden, not wanting to ask for help, not wanting to show up as your highest self. There's blocks you have to move through in order to take action. Maybe you have to send the email to the client that you didn't want to have to like write persistently 3 times, or maybe you have to show up on stage and tell the story that you were scared shitless to do. It does take action, but I say take the action that is intuitive, not the one from your head, not the one that feels forced, not the one that's from your ego, but the one that's coming through from your soul. And if you do that consistently, if you take that consistent intuitive action, truly you will create the life of your dreams.
Oh, that was so well said, and such a simple way to describe that fine line and that balance. And it all comes back to developing the self-awareness, which comes back
Yeah.
to the modality, the hypno breath work.
Mhm.
So we will of course link everything in the show notes, but for those of you listening, you can get a free 7-day trial of mastery. And I want you to share too, like what would be the most supportive of you and of the app? How can we as a community really rally behind this? Because it is going to be big. I mean, it is, and you already know this, but what's the most supportive thing other than, of course, signing up and experiencing it for ourselves?
Yeah, definitely sign up and experience it. I love the 7-day reset, which feels intuitive for me to share right now for some people listening. I think that's the one that will really help them get into alignment and get really clear. But testimonials, if it moves you, if it helps you on the App Store is always really helpful. Sharing with your network. We are really committed to giving people an outlet, like to help people live more meaningful, fulfilled lives, to help them get on the path to their purpose. And that's really what each session is meant to do. Each session helps you shift, it gets you clearer, it releases a subconscious block, and it gives you a tangible action step. There's an action step literally built into the app after each session, so you can check it off. So just share it, experience it, and let us know, because I love hearing the feedback.
Oh my goodness. Well, everything's going to be in the show notes, like I said. So make sure to head there and follow Francesca and follow Mastery as well on Instagram and all of the places. But there's one more question that I love to
Yeah.
ask. And this will be fun to hear your answer because as an achiever myself, one of the things I've really been practicing is slowing down to acknowledge myself for the big and little wins throughout the
Mm.
day. We just call it your powerhouse moment. And it can be anything big or small. But when I ask the question, what's a recent powerhouse moment that you want to celebrate yourself for right now? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh, the first thing that just came to mind was I was pitching Mastery on an investor call, and I got a little bit disrespected on the call, shockingly, which was really surprising to me because, we're out here trying to do good in the world. And it was a pretty jarring comment, and I wanted to react and I wanted to defend myself and I wanted to defend Mastery. But instead, I took all the tools that I practice and that I teach. And in that moment where my nervous system was extremely heightened and extremely on the attack, I just breathed and very calmly and very maturely just explained sort of my perspective and held space for that person and showed compassion for maybe their angle and where they were coming in from, and just executed a very intense VC meeting with a ton of grace. And with that, I was very proud of myself.
Ooh, I'm like, that's one of those like moments where you get to see your own growth and
Mhm.
your own modality in
Yeah,
action. That is so cool.
yeah.
Francesca, this has been possibly one of my favorite interviews ever. I'm just
Oh,
really grateful to be connected, to follow your journey,
yeah.
to experience it for myself, and just really the acknowledgement piece of the impact you're going to make in the world that you're already making. And I'm just excited to watch the ride.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this connection. It feels special.